Welcome to On Top of the Covers, a weekly podcast by Orlove dedicated to all the creative visionaries, entrepreneurs, artists, makers, disruptors, all of you in and around the world that are constantly contributing to, the culture of music with your talent or with your entrepreneurship or just doing things differently. On this show, we feature just inspirational stories of people contributing to the culture of music, how they do it creatively, artistically, personally, professionally. I'm Matt Gottesman, your host of the and director of the Orlove brands. You guys can reach out to me at Matt Gottesman on Instagram. I answer each and every text, DM, reply, response for like the last 8 years, as many of you have come to know. And we say that music is one of the biggest connectors in the world. It's a common bond, and we're opening up conversations of the art and its contributors, many of their missions, because we're here to show you very unconventional ways and different paths to success. And I have an incredible guest today who we were just starting to talk a little bit, and we're going to dive into some of his amazing mind and his experience. And we had to do a quick reset. So I'm really grateful here to be meeting with Wez Saunders, who's the managing director of Defected Records. And we're going to be focusing very heavily today, not just on his background and a lot of the choices that he made in his rise with Defected and just in music culture, but also developing people and having the right mindset and focusing on mental wellness and mental health. It's something that's been very close to my heart for many years, at least a decade, if not more. And then in my own personal growth and development. And developing people starts with how we develop our core, how we develop that affects other people. It also affects our businesses, our brands. It affects the things that we want to create in this world, our art, the way we want to express ourselves, the way we relate to others, the way we have empathy for others, the way we hold space for others, the way we develop our world around us, period. And so Wes and I are going to dive into a lot of that. And I know he's got an incredible background, so I'll give you just a few of the rundown stats, which is that, he's the managing director of Defected Records, which needs no introduction. It's one of the biggest leading independent record labels in the world. He joined it in 2010 as club promotions manager, and that position swiftly evolved to managing club promotions, and as well as Defected's in-house radio. He became executive producer of the Defected in-house radio show, airing across 100 stations, 70 countries worldwide. In 2017, he was promoted to managing director after working as head of marketing for the business. And he now oversees all aspects of the company, including recordings, promotions, events, and business affairs. And his passion for dance music actually started in his teens when he started as a DJ touring across the UK, as well as working with now established artists in production and remixes as a writer. And with a young family, he put his music career on hold and went to work in the finance sector, which I am really hoping he's going to talk about when he talks about his background, because he went on to work for Deutsche Bank for 12 years. He was promoted every 2 years to become vice president and on his way to become the youngest director in Deutsche Bank operations history. But in 2008, when his younger brother Jamie was diagnosed with and 23 days later died of leukemia, turned his world upside down, and that grief gave him a new outlook. He decided to return to music and leave his career in investment banking. So in 2010, he set up a label suite, which went on to host 6 record labels, which integrated into a charity organization and helped manage artists including Darren Emerson, formerly Underworld. And again, he's got an incredible background, so I'm paraphrasing some of this because it's just quite phenomenal. He had a chance encounter with Simon Dunmore. Wes's career began at Defected, so he started working his way up through the company to his current position. He has also been responsible for signing some of the imprint's biggest hits, including Camel Fat and Elder Brooks' platinum-selling Cola, Lee Walker versus DJ Dion, featuring KDB and MNEAK, Freak Like Me, and most recently, Endor's Pump It Up, which is certified gold or higher in 4 territories, and John Summit Deep End. And then during his tenure as managing director, he's overseeing the company's Ibiza seasons, navigating the move of Defected to Eden and Glitterbox to Ibiza, and the growth of Defected Croatia Festival and the birth of Defected London Festival. Defected concluded 2019 having hosted 200 plus events worldwide across Defected, Glitterbox, and Classic Music Company, as that is not an easy feat. So we have to give this man massive respect, as well as surpassing 1 billion streams per year across the labels. And then last year's, pandemic put events on hold, but they navigated the company with the leadership of Wes through that period. And they launched the Defected Virtual Festival Series and accumulated 19 million views and raised 1.2 million for charity. So Wes, thank you again. I appreciate you. As the detailed oriented person I am, I appreciate running through that with you again. Thank you for being here.
No problem, Matt. Thanks for having me. Very kind of you to invite me on. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, because you have an incredible background, we'll get right to that. But we're going to start off with the rapid fire questions, and you were already giving me some amazing answers ahead of time. So, I'm looking forward to you sharing them with the rest of the world. I always start with if all music was gone and it was wiped from the face of the earth, and you could save only 3 albums, and everybody is relying on you, Wes, for those 3 albums, what would they be?
Somebody asked me this question not so long ago, and
Right.
my answer was based on 3 things. One, something that reminded me of my childhood and my family. One that reminded me of more recent times of my friends and family, and one that was suited to my mood. So I picked the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This is the first album that I ever listened from front to back, and it really reminds me of my dad and my mum and my childhood. I picked Arctic Monkeys, Whatever People Say I Am Is What I'm Not, because actually it reminds me of my wife and children and friends, and I know that album back to front, word for word. And then I was thinking of something more dance orientated, and Fortet was going to be the third choice, but I ended up going with Moby Play, purely because it's quite diverse, and I think between 3 albums that would suit my moods. Ever the analyst, you see, I like to plan things out strategically. That would be why I'd pick those 3 albums.
Yeah, and I previously, I'd mentioned that such great albums, and I always love seeing how people answer that question, because I know we're in good hands. I know we're in good hands if these are the choices that we could live with. These are all really, really great choices. So on to the second question: name an influential person, living or non-living, that if you could interact with for one night, who would it be?
My initial thought was my late brother Jamie, because actually he's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then it was a toss-up between 2. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, because he's been incredibly successful right across his entire career, everywhere he's gone. But I think the person I would have to pick would be Prince, because the guy is, uber creative, uber talented, was around at a time that was quite challenging for musicians. He had integrity. He had a number of things that I would say Prince.
Yeah, you already know how I feel about, well, all of your choices are great. I can vouch with you. Jamie for you would be like my father for me. He was my mentor and best friend I lost a year and a half ago. And, there's so much additional conversations I would have. So I understand that. And then Prince, what he did for art and for integrity and creativity and the industry and standing up for everybody, it was phenomenal. Now, I know you're going to answer number 3. And I can't wait for you to mention this. In your opinion, what's the best music-focused film of all time for you? It could be a documentary, a series, fiction, a rockumentary. It could be anything you want. What would it be?
It'd have to be the Defiant ones. And Simon Dunmore and I actually, we must have about sort of 4 or 5 times each, probably more. And we spoke about it a lot. It's something that we've kind of encouraged the company to watch, and it just gets so much out of it. Both Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre's stories are quite incredible, and there's a lot to be learned from it. Good, bad, and ugly, and it's a fantastic documentary. And if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend you do. Not to you, Matt, because I know you've seen it. But yeah, that's enough. Sometimes when I'm just like late at night, sitting there working on my laptop, I'll put that on in the background still, because it's just like snippets you can pick out of it. It's just
I watch it 1 to 2 times a year, so every 6 months. And I do the same thing on this other computer over here. I leave it on the background while I'm working. It's just, there's something about the entire, like the energy of, each of their individual journeys, how the worlds collide, how creativity works, how they stay very close to their core and in their gut and in their knowing of the things that they do, which in any industry, navigating from your core is, it can be also often met also with resistance to the people who can't see your vision. And they were like, okay, well then I'm standing up for this and get out of my way. And just phenomenal journeys that they both had.
Yeah.
And finally, what's an important book, podcast, platform, Audible, anything that has helped you really navigate your creativity and your passion?
I mean, I read all of Seth Godin's books,
Yes.
and Simon Dunmore introduced me to Seth Godin. And as a marketing strategist, he's well worth reading, every single one, actually. His values on community are very much aligned to Simon and myself. Simon Sinek, I mean, I first caught a video of him saying that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And it was the Apple theory and really understanding why Apple are so successful. And he's somebody that, for me, is that's very much the kind of way that my mindset works. And I've studied psychology and sociology, and it's really interesting to read what he has to say. But the one book that stands out for me that I would, again, highly recommend that you read it if you can, is The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. I'm a very big believer in the law of attraction. I treat people how I would like to be treated. I kind of believe that if you view it and manifest your desires, that you can achieve what you want. And I didn't believe that before. I mean, after my brother died and after I set my goals and my life changed, and I really started to kind of put that into practice and believe in the law of attraction. It was only then that I started to come out of the grieving process. And ever since then, every year, I just have this very simple theory of be better than the person you were yesterday. So I'm constantly looking back and going, right, how can we do better than this? And I believe that we're going to achieve those goals and subsequently do. And, we work hard, but The Secret is there's been a phenomenal addition to my creativity and my passion.
Those are all, amazing choices. I spoke with a couple of the guests on The Secret who came on the other show, and you can imagine what those deep dive conversations look like. I really appreciate it for when it came out, and it helps people better understand that we're constantly making decisions whether we like the outcomes or not. And so I always tell people, if you could create your world from the ground up, what would it look like? And a lot of times we're making decisions from a very emotional place, and that's okay to understand that we all have emotions. But once you start to actually understand your emotions and like where they're coming from, and then like what would you want differently? How would you do it differently? How would you make the decisions differently? You can start to realize I always say manifestation isn't a hope, it's a behavior, because when we start being more present and actively present in the decisions we're making and why we're doing something, and not being afraid to make those decisions that are better for us, suddenly we end up in the life that we wanted. So, and also Seth Godin, I have one of his collectible, I don't know if you've ever seen this. He's got the collectible books that are, it's like, it's this big, it's a massive coffee table book. And it says like, this might work. And it's a collection of all of his other books into one. It's like a big, thick. Yeah. So I'll have to send you a link afterwards, but,
check that out. That'll be added to the collection. Yeah.
Yes, sure. Yes. I have it upstairs. Actually, I'll send you a picture and a link for it later. But so amazing. Now listen, I want to dive into your background for context for the audience, because you have an incredible background, and you started off in music. You did what I know a lot of times society says is the responsible thing, especially because you also had a family, which I highly respect that you did. And yet you still return back to, your root, to the soul, to a knowing. I would love for you to talk a little bit about that for context about your journey, because I think that's an immensely important thing for a lot of people to draw from. We can try to detour or, delay what is closest to us for as long as we want, but there will always be that yearning until I think we return to it. So I think there's a lot to be learned from your experience, but I would love for you to share your background, your story.
So for as long as my parents tell me, not even beyond what I can remember, music's always been in my soul. Like, I was born extremely premature, and my mum tells stories of how at like 6 weeks old, I was moving and doctors were saying I was a dancing baby and stuff like that. Although I'm sure my children would be embarrassed by me trying to dance now. But when as far as I can remember, music's really been in my soul, and my parents were big music fans. But growing up, not being able to play an instrument, that was never really something that kind of set my mind on it. When I was sort of 6 to 10 years old, my dad came home. He used to always bring something home when he was working away, and he brought home a copy of like Mars Pump Up the Volume, and he sat me down and started talking through all the samples. This is Eric B. and Rakim, this is James Brown, and it was just like blew my mind, right? And I was just like this young kid who all of a sudden had gone from understanding that music was made by a man or a woman and their guitar, to now understanding that there was what essentially is sampling. I had no idea, right? It's like electronic music. So that really caught my attention, and I didn't really know how to kind of get into that. And my parents bought me a little sampler, a little synthesizer, and all stuff that I just didn't have a clue how to work. Then when I got to about well, my parents bought me a Sony Walkman on my 10th Christmas. And I dropped it down the stairs, and the Walkman had tape and radio, and it could only tune into Kiss FM in the UK, which at the time was an underground radio station before it became legal. And I was listening to all these DJs that since become heroes, people like, Roger Sanchez guest mixes and Colin Dow and Colin Favor. I don't know if the audience would know those guys, or Trevor Nelson, who are big DJs in the UK. And my friends are listening to Michael Jackson and Annie Lennox and Madonna, and I'm listening to stuff that's got no words, and essentially was like acid house and rave music, or hardcore in some cases. And then my parents bought me decks, going through teenage years, getting into jungle and drum and bass, and then I started getting into like slowing down and getting into garage. And then from garage, it kind of went into the rave arena. And then from the rave arena, I found Sasha and Digweed, and I learned a bit about what ultimately was trance and deep house. And I was getting into learning a little bit more about the history of house music, and I had cousins who were DJs who would give me records, and I was DJing and I was winning competitions, and I was friends with Zabila, and everything was going really well. And then my wife fell pregnant, and everybody told me that I should get a real job. So I academically was a really strong student. I focused on getting a real job, and I got a job at investment banking. I started working for Bankers Trust, which was acquired by Deutsche Bank. My wife and I are 41 this year, and our children, our son just turned 19. Our daughter will be 22 in May. So it gives you an idea of how young we were when we had children. In fact, by the time we were my daughter's age, we were married with 2 children. I'd have killed her if she'd done that. Right? But anyway, that's a dad thing. That's do as I say, not what I do. I focused on a career in investment banking. So as with everything, my ethos with everything is to do better than the person I was yesterday, as I mentioned before. And so I started working in a bank, started at a junior level, very quickly started supervising people at the age of 19, which was quite a challenge when people found out how old I was, because I always looked older. And then I was promoted every 2 years I was there, and I was vice president on the way to director in 2008. And my brother, who's my best friend, 3 years younger than me, was sadly diagnosed with and died of leukemia in June 2008. And it just turned my life upside down. And when he was in hospital, and I said to him, look, let's have this conversation. If the worst happens, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to raise awareness of leukemia, because until this point, I had no idea. So I said, well, I don't have to wait for you to die for that to happen. We didn't know he was going to die at the time. It's just the way we would speak to each other. And I started to raise awareness for leukemia charities, for cancer research and Teenage Cancer Trust and various other leukemia-based charities. And we raised nearly 265 grand for various leukemia charities in practically 6 months. And we had done a number of events and activities. And after that happened, and I sort of started to grieve after Christmas, 6 months later, and I really started to think about, what I wanted to do with my life. And I realized life's too short. I don't want to work in banking anymore. I went in to speak to my manager, and I said, look, I don't want to do this anymore, but I haven't got the money to leave. And ironically, at that point, I was program manager, overseeing all the projects for Deutsche Bank. And he sort of said, well, if you finish all the projects and there isn't a job for you, then, the redundancy may be an option. So I did that, and it took me nearly 2 years to get into that position. And on the 24th of June, 2010, and I remember that because it was the day before my 30th birthday, I was made redundant from Deutsche Bank. And on the 26th of June, 2010, the day after, I started my own record label, Sweet. And I'd obviously had this experience in my teens of DJing and producing and writing and all sorts. So I came back into the industry, but of course, this is at the time that superstar DJs were, huge. And a lot of my friends had gone on to become, megastars, obviously, were touring and didn't have the time or to kind of help in that sense. So I really just started to focus on things from the ground up. And a friend of mine, Norman Hines, who runs Strip Music Club, was a mentor for me at that time. And he sort of sat me down and taught me the ropes and really helped me to understand how to release music and promote music as an independent record label. I was DJing and producing, and I started that in June, obviously, and the first paycheck I got in November was like 265 quid. And I was just like, fuck, how am I going to feed my family with £265 in 3 months? I'm going to have to pull my finger out my ass and really make something of myself here. And so I developed the label label suite, and that consisted of 5 labels, one of which was a community development arm. And we were teaching young people how to produce music and how to be radio presenters and producers. And I was managing artists. And part of this charity organisation work, a friend of mine, James Fennins, had set up or had contacts with Marshall Jefferson, who had contacts with Kevin Saunderson. And Kevin said, look, my sons need some assistance in learning how to produce. So we worked with Dantes and Damari at teaching them how to produce, and the whole concept kind of developed from there, which was an amazing experience. But during that time, I had co-written some of the 20th anniversary remixes of Inner City Good Life for Kevin Saunderson. I was managing Darren Emerson, as you mentioned, and doing some other things. And Kevin introduced me to Simon Dunmore. One night I was sitting at home. It was late, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. And I was just kind of monitoring and managing my finances and looking at the scope of everything I was doing. And I felt like I'd hit a ceiling. There was only a certain amount of hours in a day. I was running 5 labels. I was developing artists. I was running various outlets. And it was pretty static. I couldn't put any more time in, and I couldn't grow my business anymore on my own. So I was like, I need a mentor. So I sent Simon Dunmore an email to say, this is who I am. This is what I've done. I know we've been acquainted through Kevin, but, this is my history. And Simon's time was always really precious. So he said, come in for a chat. So I was like, wow, that's a great opportunity. So I came into Defected Records, HQ in London, had a chat with Simon, and it was around the time of Wolf of Wall Street. And Simon said to me, have you seen Wolf of Wall Street? So I said, yeah. He said, I believe you could sell me this pen. Yeah. So I was like, that was nice. So after the meeting, I thought that was it. And a couple of days later, I was in bed with a chest infection, and I don't answer my phone when I'm ill. I don't answer my phone when I'm in bed. It goes on airplane mode. But for some reason this day, I didn't put it on airplane mode. And I don't answer withheld numbers or unknown numbers. And an unknown number called me, and I answered the phone in bed when I was sick. And his voice says, is that Wez? And I'm like, yeah, it's Simon Dunmore. How would you like a job? So I said, what is the job? So he said, it's club promotion. So I thought he meant promoting club nights. So I was like, oh, don't know. And he said, well, I said, what does it entail? And he said, it's basically you've got to, your job is to get DJs to play Defected Records. And I was like, Simon Dunmore is going to pay me to get DJs to play Defected Records. Surely that just happens organically, right? So I'm like, okay. So I came in, and he gave me the job. I took the job, took the opportunity, and I started at the company. And very quickly, I changed the role to not only promote club music, but also to be a radio plugger and plug records to radio. And then because of my understanding of the history and the current dance music, I started to be producer of the Defected radio show. And we switched producers presenters at the time from Copyright to Sam Divine. And we started to grow. We moved the host to This Is Distorted, and they started to help us to syndicate the show, and we're really using it as probably arguably number one marketing asset that Defected has now, with, as you say, 100 stations in 70 countries worldwide. It's quite a growth, and since then we've developed, and it's become not just Defected, but Glitterbox, etc. So then at the same time, I was still doing all these things together. There was an opportunity for me to step into marketing for recordings. So I started marketing for recordings. Then the label manager left, and I became label manager. And then the head of marketing left, and I became head of marketing. And I was still doing all of the same jobs, by the way, at the same time. And then the managing director was leaving. Simon just said to me, what would you like to do? And I said, well, one day I'd like to run the company. And I didn't expect him to offer it to me there and then. And shortly after, he offered me the position of managing director, which I accepted. That was 2016. And at that point, the Defected business model was one that was very compilations focused, and it wasn't so much on the singles. It was more cash flow business. It was more volume, and we were doing the same events on a regular basis. Ibiza and certain locations, residency at Ministry of Sound. And we just decided to really kind of strategize and try to push the boundaries and be better than the person we were yesterday. So streaming started developing. So we moved the business model, reverted the business model to kind of be more open-minded when it came to streaming. Defected had a history of licensing on repertoire to other labels in order to capitalize on the funding and cash flow. But we decided to keep the rights to our records. I mean, I remember getting a phone call from Elderbook's manager with a well into six-figure offer for Cola from a major label, and sort of having my phone and sort of saying to Simon, like, are we really going to say no to this, you know? But we did. We said no, and we kept the rights, and it will prove to be a real turning point for us as a business. And then our events business started to grow. There was a bit of a shake-up. We started to do our festival in Croatia. The Glitterbox brand had been bubbling for a few years, and we moved it from boom to space to high in Ibiza. And the Glitterbox brand became a secondary touring brand as well as Defected. And then in 2019, whilst growing each of those areas along the way, as well as many others, we put on our first London festival. And in 2019, we did 250-ish events, which was, we'd gone from doing 25 to 50 to 100 to 250 in the space of like 3 to 4 years. 2020 was geared up to look like a pretty amazing year for the company. And obviously, at the start of the year, the pandemic started to take a hold. And I remember my daughter coming in to me. As I said, she was 20 at the time, 21 last year, 22 in a couple of weeks, and just saying, Dad, should I be concerned about this coronavirus? And me saying, oh, no, there's been bird flu in the past and swine flu and all these like illnesses. Hopefully it'll disappear before you know it. Little did I know, and little did anyone know, that wasn't going to be the case. So as it was edging towards March last year, we made a conscious business decision to start working from home to protect staff and families. So on the 12th of March last year, we reverted back to working from home, or reverted to working from home, which is the first time that we've done it as a company. And we've actually been working from home ever since. I mean, right now I'm in the office, right? I've come to the office today because we've got an opportunity and a strategy meeting. But the idea was to work from home for 3 weeks and return, and then here we are a year later, still working from home in the main. So what we noticed very quickly was that we just hired James Kirkham, who's Chief Business Officer. Who's one of the strategy is to develop into a new era music company. So the idea was James would come in and oversee our constant development as a media company. And we actually went on to release our first feature-length film last year in Glitterbox Where Love Lives. So that kind of thing has started to develop. He was also brought in to continue a digital marketing strategy to grow our community from the previous 3 years and to essentially work as like commercials. So having sort of found ourselves in that position, I was just sitting at home on a Friday, and Simon Dunmore and Tom Coxhead, who's our digital marketing manager, and I were just chatting on WhatsApp about the situation because we've been working from home for like a day and a half. And I just said, we need to put on some sort of virtual festival because our community need us, right? And they're going to need something, a bit of hope and a bit of positivity through this situation. And of course, I didn't expect it to be, ongoing. I thought it was going to be a one-off or maybe 2 or 3. And we ended up putting on 19 virtual festival events last year. And we raised £1.2 million dollars for the COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund. We've helped contribute to raising 75 grand for the Ibiza food banks. We raised nearly £100,000 for Mind, which is a mental health charity in the UK. Do you have Mind in the US? Is Mind a global charity? I don't know.
I don't. I'm not as familiar with it, so I don't know. I don't want to misstate it if it is or isn't. Yeah. I
mean, we obviously very well connected with them in the UK, so I know that. And we just put on this show that was the DJs all volunteered, and we put on these events to just kind of give a little bit of hope and positivity during that time. And since then, we've been asked to be the official host and relaunch the Europa League and Champions League last year by UEFA. And I had a fascinating call with the WWE. I'm a secret WWE fan, by the way.
I grew up on it.
And so is my son. Not so secret. But they said that they literally, I mean, again, the story and is a lovely one, and not one that I'm definitely not taking credit for. But the guy, they were sitting in the office with Defected Virtual Festival on in the background, talking about how we're going to get WrestleMania last year. And they just like looked at the screen and were just like, you know, if Defected are putting on shows in empty clubs, we could put on WrestleMania in an empty arena. And it's just like, to hear someone like that say something like that was just mind-blowing. And of course, those guys are super talented. They'd have got to that decision in the end with or without Defected Virtual Festival. But it's nice to hear people telling you stories like that. And it was just really about going back to our core, as you said, you know, for my career path being, you know, at the heart and core, I am one of our community. I am a house music fan. I love house music. Music picks me up. It serves my mood. And I just wanted to be able to do that for people, to let them know that it's Friday again. Yeah, because you're locked down. You don't know what day of the week it is. You're furloughed. You don't know what you're doing. It's like, we just wanted to give somebody that something to look forward to, and really to kind of, you know, let people know that we're there for them. And subsequently, I think that the festival activity was, you know, successful in a sense of helping people. And that's all we wanted from that. And now we are starting to come out of the other side of it. Community's grown during that time. I'm very grateful, very thankful to our fans and our community. And now we're just literally, I'm in the office because we've been strategizing today about what's next for Defected and how we can further serve the community. So that's my story.
I love it. There's a lot of really interesting character traits in there that you know, that I want to mention. I was taking some really interesting notes while you were talking. Well, first of all, your constant ability to ask, or to be honest about where you're at, that humility, that humbleness, whether you realize it or not. Like when you were talking about when you walked into into the office at Deutsche Bank, and you're like, hey, I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. And then being able to be honest like that, so you can kind of figure out a plan. Or with Simon, well, first with a mentor, and how to release and promote music for the record label, and then meeting Simon and then asking him for advice and mentorship, and then it turning into an opportunity. And this kind of goes back a little bit to your point about the secret and manifesting our desires. A lot of times it's actually out of humility and humbleness and the ability to ask really great questions to really good people who will help you. Just the sheer act of asking is like, oh, I'm so glad you asked. Let me help you for asking. I like when people represent that, because it shows you how far opportunities, how much opportunities can come into our world when we allow it, number one. And number two, when we actually seek it. And you're always just seeking help. And at the same time, those very things were seeking you. So I thought that was really, really cool.
You only learn when the shit hits the fan, right? You don't learn.
Yes.
Everything goes well. You don't learn anything. So at the end of the, if the shit hits the fan, you probably don't know. Or you probably didn't know something. So unless you ask the question, how are you going to ever learn from that experience, right? And it's really important that you don't be afraid to ask. And I try to install it in my children to say, listen, if you don't know, just say you don't know. It's okay. And the same thing with staff. Right. If you make a mistake and you ask the question, it's obviously if you make a mistake twice and you've already asked the question, then, we need to have a conversation about it. If you do it a third time, then, well, we definitely need to have a conversation about it. But that first time, it's like you've got to give people that time and energy and support. As babies, you don't know. You get taught by your parents, and that doesn't stop. You get taught by your parents. You get taught by your friends. You get taught by your teachers. You get taught by your partners. You get taught by your staff, your boss, the owner of the company. Everybody's teaching each other all the time. The world's just a big learning experience constantly, which is great. And I never try to compete with anyone or anything. I'm just trying to do better than I did yesterday. And as a result of that, I'm very happy for other people's success. And I'm happy to ask and talk to people about their journeys and their success stories. And and learn from those,
I think you did and do one of the most important aspects in leadership, whether in raising children or in a business environment and with your employees or your colleagues, which is, if you don't know, ask. But more importantly, making the space safe to be like, it's okay not to know. I can help you if you let me know. I can be a part of the solution. We can learn it together. And it empowers you when you actually feel comfortable to ask. I find that in a lot of environments where people feel uncomfortable, it's because they're afraid of making mistakes. They're afraid of what people might think. They're afraid if their bosses might fire them. They're afraid of overstepping boundaries. And all of that makes for a very tense environment that really can't be as productive as it could be, versus environments where it's highly welcomed and we're all rowing the boat together.
Yep, agreed.
How many total employees are with Defected?
Well, there's 40 in London, and at the peak time of our summer seasons, we can have between 160 and 180 staff on the payroll across multiple territories. So, yeah, most of that's seasonal, but it's 40, 45-ish in the UK. Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit at the top of the show about developing people. You guys have a very strong culture. That's one of the things that I've observed with Defected over the last couple of years and getting to know you just from an observer. You guys have a very strong culture. And you mentioned community a lot of times as well, too. And thank you. If I could just put that part on repeat when I talk to these big brands sometimes, when they ask for some consulting, I'm like, listen, everything will always come down to the community you create out of your audience, and and humility, and just being open and honest with them and welcoming them and guiding them and making them part of what you're creating. Sometimes I think, sometimes brands have a hard time with it because they thinking too much about, the stuff they shouldn't be thinking about. They're fearing too much. But how have you been able to also talk to me a little bit about the creating of the culture within the company, within the brand, because that seems to also pour out over into what you're doing with your audience a lot of times too.
I think Simon actually did it. Simon Dunmore actually did it with our audience. He's been doing it with our audience from day one. I mean, if anybody's ever met Simon, if Simon walked through a club and checked out what the sound system and the DJs, whatever else, he'll stop and speak to anybody that wants to stop and speak to him. Has photos with everybody. It's he's very kind of much more accessible than an owner of a company should be. But when we did our first Croatia festival, I'll say that, by the way, I mean, just to clarify that point, so that trip myself up, is legitimately and rightly so, because I said before, we are our community, right? We are house music fans, and we're just very fortunate to be doing the jobs to help serve their needs to some degree. Obviously, there's a commercial value in that, but at the same time, without our community, it's like sports teams. Without the fans, you're nothing. Yeah, and you've got to realize that. So we spend a lot of time strategizing around how we can do that, whether it was pre-social media and digital marketing and post and current. And we figure out ways to kind of constantly give them something. Like I say, with a virtual festival activity, no one paid anything for that. We were paying staff to deliver on those, and the DJs were doing it for free. The company's essentially doing it for a cost to staffing, but our community didn't have to pay anything for that. And subsequently, they were willing to donate the money to raise money for charities, which was much more needed at that time, right? So we've kind of constantly looking at and trying to understand and listening to our community as much as we can, whether that's sticking to our music policies, which are front and center and at the heart of what we do, or whether it's kind of listening to any kind of issues and gripes that they may have when it comes down to events or ticket purchasing or anything else. And we just really are constantly watching and listening. And our first Croatia festival is always the perfect example of the kind of lengths that we go to appease our community. There was about a 2 or 3 hour delay of getting into the site, right? And it was only a small boutique festival at the time, 2,000, 3,000 people. And Simon Dunmore, Tom Cox, said our digital marketing manager I mentioned previously, and myself, walked up and down that queue speaking to every single person to say, sorry about the delays. We're just setting the site up. We apologize. You'll be in soon enough. Where are you from? Like, nice to meet you. And my wife was astounded because she came into the site like 2 days later, and she turned around to one of my staff members and was like, "Where's Wez?" And one of the community was like, "Oh, he's over on the beach stage," right? People just, then knew who we were, and they knew that we were accessible. And you said it, people tweet me or send me a DM or a Facebook message or an email. I try my absolute hardest to answer every single person. It's really tough sometimes and can take days, but
yeah,
still, 11 o'clock at night, up messaging people or over the weekends and stuff, just to make sure that, people are looked after. At some point, it will become very, very challenging and perhaps a little unrealistic for me to commit to something like that. But right now, we do put the lengths in to do just that, right? And we care at the end of the day, and we genuinely care. It's like, without our community and without what we do, what happens to house music? It's like, so we have duty of care.
The way I look at it is my community, our communities are the brand. It's really the basis of like creating from the outside in a lot of ways. You get a little bit of Seth Godin in there, which talks a lot about community. He has for many, many years. And in the aspect of I'm expressing myself, or I'm expressing this idea within a culture, in a subset, and in a niche, and that'll attract a group of people. And as the people come in, being open to a two-way dialogue that says, "Oh, you like this?" Like, "Yeah, and I also like when you did that. Like, that's interesting. I like that too. Let's play around with that. Oh, how can we stop doing that?" And taking back and forth this feedback allows the humanization of a brand, and for people to feel like they're a part of something that's growing. They're voluntarily a part of its core foundational elements, right? And feeling like, oh, I was there at the beginning. You hope to keep most of them. Some obviously leave over time at different times, depending on how you mold and shape, but that's even music, that's artists, that's everybody. But I love the idea of creating from a very community standpoint. And then what you guys did when you were actually reaching out to everybody, sorry for the delay, sorry this is happening. Again, I tell people all the time, like, humility is a superpower, because you get people, brands or brand owners, people who are worried sometimes about, oh, well, how will this sound, to the audience? I'm like, they'll love you for it. I was like, because you're a human being. And like, if you show people you're a human being, they look at you and go, I really respect that. And people are actually very forgiving when you own it and you're like, hey, we're a little delayed. Like, no problem, Wes. Like, take your time. I'm just excited to be here. Versus like not integrating with them, not paying attention to them, and being like, oh, well, we'll get to it when we get to it. Humans are humans, and they all have emotions. And I think when they feel included, right? When they feel seen and heard and understood, and you're like, hey, thank you so much for being here. We're running into a few delays, but thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Are you kidding me? Like, now they're a brand ambassador for life.
It's like when you have an argument with your partner, you just want to just say or hear, I'm sorry, I'm like misunderstood. Yeah. That's all people want. They don't, they don't want silence. They infuriate you. So it's but you know what, you asked a question about developing people and stuff, and it's like, development's an interesting thing in my opinion, because it is as simple as my ethos and philosophy about being better than the person who was yesterday. It's just a case of okay, I ran not me literally, this is an example, but you're a 100-meter sprinter and you run yesterday in 11 seconds. Just run it in 10.99 today, yeah? And do it in 10.98 tomorrow, yeah? It's like, you don't have to go, right, Usain Bolt's beating the world record in 80 seconds. That's my target. It's just be better than you was yesterday. And trying to help people, you don't have to dictate or directly influence or manipulate somebody to help them develop. You could just help coach them to think in a different way, think more positively, be more optimistic. It's like the Ernest Hemingway quote of, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. It's like, believe you can, yeah, and actually aim to achieve, and start small and just keep on going and just keep moving forward. And it's like staff, pretty much it's almost entirely in my time. James aside, any positions that we've had, we've hired, we've promoted from within, and we hire people who are house music fans. We hire people who understand the brand, so that we can look after our community by being the same as them, and we help people to develop by giving them or enabling them to take opportunity. In the main, I'm sure I've got a couple of staff members that may think otherwise, but I think in the main, people, believe that that's the case. And I like to think of it, and I don't really want to sound like I'm undermining anyone, but I like to think of it in the same way as I do like parenthood or friendships. It's like if your kid falls off a bike, you don't get on the bike and ride the bike. You get them up and put them back on and teach them how to ride the bike. So it would be so easy for me to do people's jobs or step in and grab things by because I've been through all the company and done everything. But your job is to help them to get back on the bike. And I think if you can do that and you do that successfully and people are willing to try again, then that's development. If people are taking responsibility and they progressing into supervisory or management or heads of department roles, that's development. If they're learning new skill sets because they were a graphic designer and now they're an animator, that's development. Whatever it is that you're trying to do. And I think people just need to think about that. The irony is I'm doing something similar myself for myself right now. I'll put myself last, ironically, in my health, and I like to eat food and not exercise, but I've sort of since last August I've been doing like 10k a day and walking, and I've lost like over 50 pounds by doing that. And my plan is to just slowly but surely kind of keep doing more and more. And it's like no matter what you do, whether it's work, diet, exercise, education, relationships, friendships, grief, mental health, it's just try to focus on taking one step at a time for development. And I think it's quite challenging sometimes for people to accept and understand. But that for me is everything starts with that first step. Well,
you bring up so many good points in there. It took me many years to, when people say, embrace the process, enjoy the process. And I wouldn't get annoyed, but I would in some ways, because I'm like, what does that mean, enjoy the process? Until I realized when you make a very intentional decision in some particular area of your life to really focus on it, in your work, in your body, in your health, in your mindset, whatever it might be, like you said, it's just those small iterations every single day. And you start realizing like, oh, wow, I can actually shape this engine that I'm creating any way that I really want to. And you have you feel like you're taking a more active role in the thing that you're building for yourself, and less the reason I find that people feel anxious or out of control is because, well, you're maybe letting other people make decisions for you versus you actually getting to know and understand the process for yourself. And I love that you also brought up, I'm not going to get on the bicycle for you. One of the biggest responsibilities we could do is empower our people, not enable them. And I don't want anybody, whether in my circle or my colleagues or, anybody, a manager, anything, to ever feel like I'm not there for them. But I want them to feel empowered enough to express themselves so that way they feel like there's an environment to do so that'll nurture a healthier way of making those iterations daily and being their better version of themselves. So I love that you said that, because whether a parent or a managing director, a CEO, these are things that people, they feel more comfortable, like, oh, okay, wait, you mean everybody goes to this? Yeah, everybody goes to this, and I can't do the work for you. I can only make the environment conducive to allow you to do the work. And then there was one other thing that you also said, well, there's many things, but I love when you're talking about community and the people who they're so familiar with the brand. It was something I was thinking about, the fact that you probably also get, people who, as they come up with the brand, they see all the angles because they are the brand. And so it's almost easier to hire within a community, because they're like, hey, have you guys ever thought about this? And you could be like, you're hired. Like, wait a minute, I didn't even ask for a job. And you're like, yeah, but you're hired. Because that's a good idea and we're going to need that, right?
Don't say things like that. I'll end up with 10 million employees, mate.
Obviously, within reason. But but it's interesting. But to your point about it, people who really know and understand the brand, as they're part of its building and shaping, they can see angles and they can kind of get out of the way of like, I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want to do I don't want to make a mistake, to more of a like, hey, can I try something? Because they're more fluid because they've been really a part of the essence of the brand versus just kind of, not having an understanding of what it is and just coming from like the outside,
I also find that, for you mentioned about the musicians, the ones that, lots of musicians are hugely successful for a period of time and then they're less successful, generally the majority. But the ones that have sustained longevity have changed with the times, and they've been adaptable, and they have learned from their audiences and also non-audience, right? So, but they've done it in a very kind of considered way to stay true to their core. And people like Elton John and Prince and Stevie Wonder and stuff like that have all really managed to kind of stay true to their sound and their vibe. And I think that Defected, whether consciously or subconsciously, has done that, not just with the Defected brand, but with Glitterbox, because Glitterbox essentially became it initially started as an outlet for people of a certain kind of probably age, in all honesty, without us thinking about that. Contemporary house and disco. It was like people who enjoyed Defected first time round, who had children, had grown up, and their kids had grown up, and now they were able to go out again. It started like that, really, and it became something that was very welcoming. And our ethos of in our house we're all equal, and being very kind of LGBTQ plus friendly, and being very welcoming. Women feel safe at the parties, and you can go there with your partner or your wife or your friends, or I've been there with my kids. It's like, again, it's treating people how you want to be treated. Really, it's as simple as that. So
it always is. And if we treat ourselves very well, if we love ourselves, if we have a lot of self-love and self-awareness, we tend to treat others that way. And by the way, I also give you a lot of credit and respect for that. Happens when you said took care of everybody else first. You put everybody else before yourself for a long time. I find that entrepreneurial people who are givers, who love to solve problems and help other people and create and build things, often can put a lot of things before themselves. I'm obviously speaking in a third person, but really talking about myself, if I was being really honest. I went through that a couple of years ago as well. And I was listening to you when you're talking about you were doing 5 different things for your company, for the label suite, and reaching that capacity. And it's funny when we get to watching my father go through what he had to go through with his health. I was like, my approach has to change. If my approach doesn't change, I don't know how I'm going to keep going at this pace health wise. And it forces you to rethink your approach. And that's where I also really started to like the process even more, in learning about nutrition, in learning about food and eating, in learning about, in training and all these things, and making it more of a very long process lifestyle, not one of these, because of what I learned in business and other areas. Instead of making it an overnight, we're going to do this in the 30-day goals or these 30-day challenges, I was like, you know what? Let me go find really good people that I can say, hey, I don't care how many years this takes. I just please teach me. And like, how much do you charge for your services? And they're like, well, how many months? I'm like, no. Like, I don't care how many, like, keep it running, like keep it ongoing. I want to like just learn and do it and make a lifestyle out of the habit. So I don't pressure myself and think like I'm going to fail at any given point in time. It's like you were saying, like you were, doing the walks and it became kind of a lifestyle, and now it's probably a habit and it's something that's part of you, and you're not, and you've done well so far, but it'll just kind of continue to reshape you, from the inside out. I mean, and I want to commend you for taking notice of that, because it's hard sometimes isn't it ironic that we have to go all the way back to the first person we need to be helping, which is ourselves, which I've also found, man, can we do even greater things for everybody else around us? The more, energy we have, and the healthier we are in the mind, and and the way we see things differently, the clarity we get, right?
Yeah. And trying to kind of now instill some of that and remind people of that in the workplace. Like, I mean, honestly, mate, I'm probably the healthiest I've been for 25 years. Like, as in, I'm eating plant-based and I'm exercising, and I mean, I do still eat meat here and there, but it's like, 8 out of 270 meals in the first quarter, it was barely anything. But trying to kind of now factor some of that into staff and understanding their physical and mental well-being, we're taking on a number of factors to try to kind of look at that as part of our return strategy at the moment in the business. We're pulling together a kind of wellness and well-being program where we're providing regular tips and tricks for staff, and beginning to recommend self-help books and podcasts, and looking into nutritional options, and providing information on the science of mind and free meditation options and app recommendations, and looking to bring in third-party speakers, and really thinking of it in a 3-stage approach. You're kind of preventative, so getting your signposting and your kind of timeouts and your offline windows understood, and your advocacy, really promoting a culture from within, from the top down, and a 2-way mental health dialogue, that kind of mentor and reverse mentorship where you're listening to staff and advising, and a 2-way kind of street, and really skilling the heads of departments, and then looking at the kind of acute angle where you start to formalize a process to sort of identify and respond to mental health crises. And, myself and our project manager internally, we've taken a psychological first aid course last year, and, I addressed the company via Zoom presentations on a regular basis, and remind people that we're kind of always there for them. And the pandemic has taught a lot of people a lot about humanity again. And I really hope that people take the opportunity, as you said, to kind of, refresh actually, and just improve themselves where they can. And I don't mean that negatively. We've all got flaws, right? No matter what you're doing or where you are, if you're really struggling with mental health and you don't have a job or somewhere to live, that doesn't mean to say that you're not able to go and achieve the things that you want to do by focusing on, getting some assistance and help to support the mental health challenges that you're facing, and begin that pathway. And it's and right now is the time to take that first step.
Mental health, mental wealth. I was very fortunate, started about 8-9 years ago, really dialing in, when a crisis happens, all of a sudden you're forced to you can look at outside factors all day long, and you might even have been affected by outside factors. Absolutely. Especially 2020 is a good example of that. But what I learned about those 8-9 years ago in those moments is I got to look at the person in the mirror, and I have to have a better understanding of exactly like what is going on. Because I didn't randomly get here by accident. Even if I didn't cause any external thing, I may not like what I'm experiencing. So I have to understand how I got those outcomes. And I found that for the first time, all I really wanted to do, people would say like, oh, I'm surprised you're not mad at so-and-so or this. And I'm like, what is that going to do? Like, even if they really were the person at fault, I'm like, how did I end up in that situation? And I found that when I really started to think about, look at my decisions and my character and my word, where am I following through? Where am I not following through? How are my emotions? Am I allowed to talk about my emotions? Like, how am I actually feeling? Hey, want to actually deal with them instead of like not, and actually be in a space or create or cultivate a space so everybody else can do it. So that way they don't have to feel bad about talking about how they're actually feeling, when most of the time, they may be in environments where it was suppressed to even be allowed to do that. So the fact that you guys are creating an environment where you're saying, hey, look, we're here for you. Like, let's have these conversations. Let's like actually open them up. And you won't be judged because of, what you may be thinking and feeling, but at least we have an idea of where maybe you are thinking and feeling, so we can maybe find a way to help. And I think creating an environment like that allows people to breathe, just have relief. Like, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that thinks some of these things. And now I'm also excited about dealing with them. And concurrently, that also affects their output with everything else in their life, their relationships, their work within the company, their artistry, their creativity. So, I mean, my hope is that, even more that you guys lead by example, and that even more of your friends in other areas are probably also doing the same, but more so that we represent a larger trend, right, for businesses and brands in the future.
I mean, people need to realize that, like, mental health or depression and other mental health issues, they generally either caused by grief or a stressful event or activity, or your personality. It could be family history, could be given at birth. But I think it takes there's still a lot of education to be done on depression and mental health. Yes. Because or substance abuse, another thing, addiction and stuff. There's a whole host of reasons, obviously not definitive there, but there's still a lot of education for people to understand the support networks that need to be put in play and what you can do to help people. And as I say, Mind in the UK is a charity organisation that is very, very close to our heart, and there's a number of other institutions and charity organisations that are there to help people, and not just to help people that are having the mental health problems, but if you are somebody that wants to help them, you can learn from these organisations through information or talking. And again, if anybody's listening to this that wants to help, then I would suggest that you contact one of these institutions to get involved, because it's as simple as picking up the phone to someone to say hello, or calling your friend, or making sure a neighbour's okay, or it can be a smile or a hello.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I tell people all the time, like, listen, I've heard it all, and even if I haven't heard it all, I'm like, go ahead and try to beat it. Tell me whatever you want to tell me. And I think, like, I think just people need that relief of, like, okay, like, it's okay to talk about these things. Like, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I think, again, creating an environment like such as what you guys are doing, that makes it so much more impactful. What do you guys have coming up? Like, what's happening next? I know we're in 2021. There's still, the virtual festivals are still going, right? What else is happening with you guys right now?
What's happening with us right now? So we are currently in the process, as I mentioned, like, where we're sort of strategizing to try to figure out a return to office strategy at the moment, and what's next. I mean, on the recordings front, we've got some interesting projects coming from Todd Edwards and Shapeshifters, Honey Dijon, Paul Smith Disco. We're looking at some nice mid to sort of longer term projects with a number of returning artists. I mean, we're talking to a few people, including like the Martinez Brothers and Eats Everything and John Summit, that have got some things going on. We're planning out our event strategy, so we've got some pretty good news, in a sense that we're actually hopeful that in Europe, the way that the vaccine rollout's gone in the UK, and the way that the European the kind of the rollout is looking more promising at the moment. The international travel is something that's yet to be defined, but again, from a European perspective, it looks like we're going to be able to start to travel from the 17th of May with certain restrictions like COVID passports and stuff. But we've got a number of events, particularly in the UK in the main, but European activity and festivals through later in the summer and Q4, and then we're going to plan out our sort of Q1, Q2 2022 strategy, and hopefully we'll be back. We're back in Australia, so we're now very hopeful that the pandemic is slowly being controlled. But we're also pragmatic, so I don't want to kind of sound like I'm being optimistic and then taking it away. It's we're mindful that we have a role to play for humanity, and unfortunately, if that does mean events are cancelled or travel plans are cancelled, then we'll make those decisions early enough. But at the moment, we've been given a lot of a lot of reason to be hopeful and positive and optimistic. So we will continue to do that, and let's see how that unfolds. But as a business, we developed our basement here. I mean, I'm currently on the ground floor in our office space. I've been here strategizing, as I mentioned. Then we've got an office space here, which is for staff, and then downstairs in our basement we have a booth, an area for live broadcasting and radio, an editing suite for audio visuals. We have a production studio. We have a networking space, and we have a space where we can do sort of town halls and that sort of activity. So we're looking to continue the advancement into the new era music company. Music will always be front and center of everything we do, but we're expanding that into the media space. We are looking at more long form content, and we actually started printing it in a magazine again last year, Faith, which is our fanzine, free fanzine that's resumed. So we're also in the print media game as well. So and our merchandise, the fans have been incredible, supportive of buying our merch throughout the whole pandemic, and the people in our store work really hard. The customer service, I hope, is top notch, because they work exceptionally well to make sure that the customer service is of a standard that I've never seen before, and I take my hat off to those guys. So it's we're hopeful, we're optimistic, and we're beginning to plan out how we return to the office.
I love that. I'm gonna put the store to test, and I'll let you know how it goes. So, no,
I'm sure I can look after you.
Oh man, I just having you on the podcast is great in general. But yes, absolutely, I'd love to. And where can everybody find you guys online? Like, I mean, all of it, whether every one of the brands, obviously Defected Records, but and yourself, if they want to reach out, where can people find you guys?
We're available, across all social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. Defected Records, Glitterbox, Classic Music Company, D for Dance, 4 to the Floor, at Defected Records, at Glitterbox, at Classic Music Company, myself at Wez Saunders. If you, I hope if you're listening and discovering Defected Glitterbox for the first time, that you will be interested in what you see and what you hear of Defected. And I hope to see you on the dance floor soon.
Oh, that's incredible, man. Thank you, Wes. Seriously, thank you so much for being on the show and, for giving your time. I know after I was listening to your background and how many things you're handling at one time, I'm sure by now you've got the right infrastructure and team, but I know how busy you are. And so for you to take that time out, especially after a strategic meeting, and come on the show and share your story and your background is absolutely incredible. And, everybody that's listening, I'm sure many of you have heard of Defected, but everybody that's listening that hasn't, immediately at Defected Records, go there, you'll see what I mean. And then of course you can look across social and the website, and Wes, they can reach out to you at Wez Saunders on Insta. You guys that are following me on Insta, just go to my followers, you'll see him in there. I mean who I'm following, you'll see him in there. And I followed him immediately once I heard more of his story and his background. I'm like, this man's incredible. So thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
And thank you very much for inviting me. It's been great to meet you, Matt, and I wish you and the podcast and the listeners the very best.
Thank you so much. Many blessings. Hanging back for 1 second for everybody listening. Thank you guys truly tuning in to On Top of the Covers. It's very fast rising. We're very grateful. It means a lot to us and to the movement and to the contribution of music culture. We're in a very interesting transitional time. I always say that the future belongs to the creators. Now we're actually in the future where the creators do own it. So maybe that's a conversation for another time, but we're really in an amazing shift, even though it has a few bumps in the road. But we also want to thank all of you guys for giving us constant feedback and being a part of the journey. Giving us a 5-star review on Apple has meant a lot to us. Please continue to do so. It helps expand the show. You can follow us on all major platforms at We Are Orlove, and myself at Matt Gottesman. And be sure to subscribe to Orlove YouTube channel for weekly launches of our web series, the Under the Covers show, where we feature artists from all over the world doing cover songs that we randomly pick for them based on their vibe. That has exploded over the last year into millions of views. So we are so grateful. And of course, you can also find exclusive footage. If you're listening to this show right now on Apple or Spotify, you can also watch this on YouTube, our YouTube channel. We'd love for you to do so. We love you, and we're out.